Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna, we're reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 15, entitled The Yoga of the Supreme Person. Today is August 9th, 2021. Chapter 15, text 10. Text 10, chapter 15. Bhagavad Gita as it is. Utkramantam Stitam Vapi Punjanam Va Guna Anvitam Vimudha Na Anupashyanti Pashyanti Jnanachakshusha Utkramantam Stitam Vapi Punjanam Gunanvitam Vimuda Nanupashyanti Pashyanti Jnanachakshusha Utkramantam Stitam Vapi Punjanam Gunanvitam Vimudha Nanupashyanti Pashyanti Jnanachakshusha Utkramantam Stitam Vapi Vapi Punjanam Gunanvitam Vimudha Nanupashyanti Pashyanti Jnanachakshusha Utkramantam Stitam Vapi Punjanam Gunanvitam Vimudha Nanupashyanti Pashyanti Jnanachakshusha Utkramantam Stitam Vapi Punjanam Gunanvitam Vimudha Nanupashyanti Pashyanti Jnanachakshusha Utkramantam Stitam Vapi Punjanam Gunanvitam Vimudha Nanupashyanti Pashyanti Jnanachakshusha. Would anyone online like to chant the verse? Okay, we'll go to the word for word. Utkramantam. Quitting the body. Stitam. Situated in the body. vapi,
Vapi,
either,
either,
bhunjanam,
Bhujanam,
enjoying,
enjoying,
va, or
or
guna anvitam,
Gunamritam,
under the spell of the modes of material nature,
under the spell of the modes of material nature,
vimudha,
Vimudha,
foolish persons,
foolish persons,
na,
na,
never,
never,
anupashyanti,
Anupashyanti,
can see,
can see,
pashyanti,
Pashyanti,
one can see,
can see,
jnanachakshusha,
Jnanachakshusha,
one who has the eyes of knowledge.
who has the eyes of knowledge.
Translation. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The word Jnana Chakshusha is very significant. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how a living entity leaves his present body, nor what form of body he is going to take in the next life, nor even why he is living in a particular type of body. This requires a great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad Gita and similar literatures heard from a bona fide spiritual master. One who is trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. Every living entity is quitting his body under certain circumstances. He is living under certain circumstances and enjoying under certain circumstances under the spell of material nature. As a result, he is suffering different kinds of happiness and distress under the illusion of sense enjoyment. Persons who are everlastingly fooled by lust and desire lose all power of understanding their change of body and their stay in a particular body. They cannot comprehend it. Those who have developed spiritual knowledge, however, can see that the spirit is different from the body and is changing its body and enjoying in different ways. A person in such knowledge can understand how the conditioned living entity is suffering in this material existence. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to the people in general. For their conditional life is very much troublesome. They should come out of it and be Krishna conscious and liberate themselves to transfer it to the spiritual world. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Parijana Saitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamascha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpati Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanu Sute Devi Kanamami Hari Priye Panchakalpata Yugyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine, Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 15, text 10, Utkramantam stitam vapi punjanam vagunanvitam vimudhananupashyanti pasyanti jnanachakshusha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. This is a section of 4 verses in Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to read the 2 verses before this. The one we read is, I refer to it as the third of a 4-verse set about transmigration, changing the body. We, or at least I, generally think of the main transmigration part of Bhagavad Gita as the 20 verses in chapter 2, text 11 to 30. Dihino, the 3rd verse there, the 13th, Dihinosmin yata dehe komaram yoganam jara tata dehantara praptir dirasta tranamuyati. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from childhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at the time of death. And then Krishna goes on to explain that. And here's another section. Text 9 of chapter 15 reads, the living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, tongue, and nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. And text 8 reads, the living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Okay, so yeah, as some of you are aware, so I took like my first personal transformation, personal development center seminar in 1979. I was 18 years old. And my older sister, my sister Carol, she was into it. She was actually employed by the LifeSpring organization, and she got her little brother David to do these seminars. Yes, so it was very exciting for me, and I took the LifeSpring version of their foundational course was called the Basic Training. And their advanced course was called the Interpersonal Experience. And yes, and so and then 2 years later, I spent a summer in West Center of Philadelphia, and I took their version. I think it's called the Leadership Program, LP, something like that. It's like 3 months. And so, so the principles there were very moving for me and impactful, and I was facilitated to come out of like a depressed victim attitude towards life, towards an empowered view of, okay, I'm responsible for my life. I'm the creator of my life, the results in my life, what's happening in my life experience. And so it was transformational from my, from my experience of life. And it was also painful, because to realize that not just for now on I'll be responsible for my life, but I've always been responsible for my life. Yes, like, oh. But then to realize I've always been responsible for my life. I've always been responsible means, that means I've been irresponsible. Okay, so it wasn't necessarily comfortable, but it was awakening, fulfilling, not always happy like that. And then it was simultaneously, so starting in 1980, I started taking copious amounts of Krishna Prasadam at the State College Krishna Center run by Stambadas Prabhu, who's now a resident of High Springs, Florida. Mm-hmm. And I started reading some of the books of Prabhupada. Sometimes Stamba would change up the prasadam times, and then I would have to hear the lecture. No fair, no fair. Right. And so I heard some philosophy, and I was reading philosophy from Prabhupada. And at the same, in those years, I was also staffing. I was staffing LifeSpring courses. I would go back to I was even leading guest events in State College, Pennsylvania, leading guest events for LifeSpring courses and things like that. There at 19, 20, 21 years old. I got trained as a short-term and crisis intervention counselor, and then started accepting responsibility to train other counselors. So I was enthused by these principles, and I switched my major from engineering to psychology, which for me represented a shift from focusing on that which is external matter to that which is more subtle. Okay, and I remember I was having some conversations with some of my LifeSpring colleagues and those who were senior to me, and because that, like, this principle of 100% radical personal responsibility, I really like that principle. And then essentially in reading this philosophy, like verses like this, reading Science of Self-Realization, I was finding the completion and perfection of that philosophy here in the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita invites us to ask profound questions, like, how come I have the nose that I have? How did I get this nose? Yes. I never started asking those questions, but others did before me. Others did, I know. This nose, the sense of touch, this ear, this tongue. So is it just an accident? Because if we take like the secular humanist approach to personal responsibility, but then did we just get thrown in and just by chance I got this David Wolf nose? Just by chance, someone's born into that family with that economic condition, or this very opulent economic condition, or is it just by chance and now be responsible? So Bhagavad Gita explains, no, it's all fluent. It's all fluent. Natvevaham jatuna samnatvam namena janadipana chevina bhavishama sarvevayam tatpara. We're eternal beings. Never was there a time that when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings on the battlefield, says Krishna, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So just as in this life, our thoughts, where we're meditating, our actions. So what we did, the consciousness we cultivated before we came into this body, that led to getting a particular type of body. It's no accident. It's very precise. It's very scientific. So that's why the personal transformation, human potential, all those principles, I didn't need to give any of it up. I discovered the completion and perfection and most sublime application of all of those principles, whether win-win, responsibility, clear intention, consciousness, and the results here in Prabhupada's teachings. So Prabhupada uses this term. As a result, he, meaning the spirit soul, he is living under certain circumstances and enjoying under certain circumstances in the spell material nature. As a result, he is suffering different kinds of happiness and distress under the illusion of sense enjoyment. So we can say, that's a contradiction. Suffering, happiness. Happiness is good. It's not suffering. Happiness is good, right? And sometimes, Prabhupada writes, enjoying happiness and distress. He keeps contradicting himself. You don't enjoy distress. Distress, you suffer. Okay, right? So, like, it's very, I smile when I read that language from Prabhupada, because the language represents a whole different paradigm. In the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there's a purport, and Prabhupada talks about the mask. He talks about he says the whole material mask is inauspicious. The whole material mask is inauspicious. And so the material mask, okay, like again, that some of you are familiar with our Sophito programs. We use that terminology in the book, Relationships That Work, The Power of Conscious Living. We use that terminology. To what extent are we living authentically? To what extent are we living behind a facade, a mask based on fear? Oh, I need to play the good guy, the nice guy, the tough guy, or the helpless one, or the funny one, or the smart one. I need to put on this show because I want people to love me. And if I just am who I am, people probably won't like me, what to speak of love me. So much of the process is about peeling off the masks. And we know that if we're living behind a mask, if we're living out of fear, putting up facades, we're not fulfilled. We might put on a happy mask, but inside it's desperation. I just want people to like me. I just want to belong. I just want people to approve of me. I don't want to be rejected at the expense of living our authentic, distinctive, purposeful life. So this verse, it gets at the core mask. Prabhupada said the very material mask is inauspicious. The very material mask. So to whatever extent it's described in the Bhagavatam, Bhayam Dvitiya Vinivesha Tasyat, that the root cause of all anxiety is misidentification of the eternal spiritual self with the material body. To whatever extent we're misidentifying with the body, and then we act according to we're the body, then we're living a facade, we're living a mask. And then we will be empty, we'll feel empty. It's like, to use an analogy often used, just like, well, two very related analogies come to me, like the dream or the virtual reality figure, the virtual reality character. And so just like in the dream, I might be enjoying like a king or queen in the palace, or my virtual reality identity might be getting points. I don't know what they do, but they're doing good. Okay. So I said, well, that's happiness. But then someone with objective vision can go, well, it's not really happiness. You're lying on the bed snoring.
It's the best.
Yeah, just burst the whole bubble. No, you're just lying on the bed. No, I'm being chased by a tiger. This is terrible. There's no tiger. There's no palace. That's what it means. Like, it's all suffering. It's all. It's also you're detached from your real life. Your real life. Wake up. Wake up to who you are. Jeev Jago. Wake up to who you are as a spirit soul. Then, in that consciousness, then everything is transcendently absolutely good. In that the soul awakening to itself and awakening to its eternal activity, bhakti yoga, devotional service. And detached from that, in the dream world, the virtual reality world, in the shadow world, we say this is good, this is bad, but it's all the self alienated from itself. And that's a suffering condition. That's why Prabhupada writes, suffering different kinds of happiness and distress in that dream world, under the illusion of sense enjoyment, under the dream of sense enjoyment. So this gets to, it's not merely abstract philosophy. Right? Everyone, safe to say, everyone's seeking true joy. Everyone's seeking peace. Everyone's seeking fulfillment, security, satisfaction, bliss, to feel loved and to be loving. And so this provides a context. The word used here, a very important Sanskrit term, jnana chakshush. to see with the eyes of knowledge. It means like, at least intellectually, to want to cultivate the capacity to see with the eyes of knowledge. Just like, let's say if I'm, let's say if I see this truck that Parampara drives. So I might see it from a bit of a distance. So I go, oh, there's Parampara Prabhu.
Sure.
So all I'm seeing is the truck. But I know it. So it's, of course, nowadays they got these remote control cars or something. But still there's a person behind it. But all I'm seeing is the truck. So, but I see like, okay, inside the truck, that's Parampara Das. So see with the eyes now, let me like cultivate, like, okay, like here's Vishnu, here's Lakshmi Priya, here's Ladini Shakti, here's Dhira Govinda Das. And like, okay, so we're not these bodies, we're not these aggregates of nose and arms and skin and blood and hair. We're the spirit soul inside. Just like, I know there's a person inside that car. And then this whole process of Bhagavad Gita, this whole process of Bhakti Yoga, it's supporting ourselves. And Prabhupada closes the purport with, and naturally one who's alive and joyful in this knowledge wants to share it. Supporting ourselves and others to make distinctions, to make progress in any field, to make progress in any field. It's like when Ladini's doing something with thread or something. I don't know what you're doing because I don't make distinctions, but you're sewing something. So she's making distinctions and she knows how to do it. And
Actually, I'm not.
I'm trusting you are. Okay. Or in any field, whether it's finances or computers or cooking, means like, yes, this spice here, not that spice there, this much and not that much, and cook. So it's not like, well, okay, cook it at 120 degrees or 420 degrees for 10 minutes or 2 hours. Won't matter. It's all the energy of Krishna. Now it matters. No, it matters. So it's true in any field. Knowledge is power. Knowledge means, intelligence means the capacity to make distinctions. Any field. Sports, art, physics. So similarly in spiritual life. And in chapter 10 also, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, of all the sciences, I am the supreme science of the self. So of course, Krishna is physics. Krishna's chemistry. Krishna's politics. And of all the endeavors, idam vipumsas tapasa shrutasya Saktasya sviktasya chaburi datayo avi chutorta kavibir nirupito yaru tamashlaka gunanu varnanam. Narada Muni speaks to Srila Vyasadeva and describes all these fields of human endeavor: politics, economics, psychology, physics, chemistry. Yeah, they're all energies of the divine, and they're all meant to bring one to glorify yaru tamashlaka gunanu varnanam. All these endeavors, business, all meant to bring ourselves and others towards glorifying He who is glorified by the choicest Vedic verses. Uttama shloka. Uttama, tama means ignorance. Uttama means above, ultimate, above ignorance. Uttama shloka. The shlokas, the shastras. So that's a name for Krishna. Uttama shloka. Uttama shloka gunanu varnanam. So this process of bhakti yoga, it's not world rejecting, it's very world embracing, and it's a science. Yes, take what we're doing, this body, our talents, our training, and utilize them in Krishna service, and then we gradually experience the ultimate purpose of life, self-realization, and remembering our connection with Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. So this jnana, so learning to see through the eyes of knowledge, at least first cognitively and then experientially, whereas like as as one becomes more and more pure in our vision. And we become pure in our vision by making distinctions, by following regulative principles. Sure, everything's Krishna's energy. The example I've often used, what is the vodka in the vodka bottle? It's Krishna's energy. Yes, it is. It's God's energy. Therefore, we can conclude, if I drink the vodka in the vodka bottle, I'll become self-realized and God conscious because it's God's energy. That's bad logic. Bad logic. You could, in the video, you could just like take a little snippet where like I'm asserting. So drink the vodka and you become a self-realized soul, and just stop it there. Put it on YouTube or something. Okay, so that's distinctions. So sure, everything's Krishna's energy. Now, how do I relate to even devotees? Vishnu and I had a brief talk this morning, right before japa. Even devotees. So there's a whole science of how to relate with devotees, right? And some devotees, and some devotees, we respect them from a distance. It's a fact. No, they're devotees, so we should intimate, we should hear from them, we should do whatever they say. No. Okay? No, it's a whole science, even relation with devotee, relation with bhakti, relation with sexual energy, relation with financial energy, relation with food, like that. So we follow regular principles, we become pure. We follow regular principles, we become pure, then more and more, the pure soul is actually seeing the soul. Vijavinaya sampane brahmane gavi hastini shunicheva sopakicha pandita samadarshina. Seeing, that's the equality verse. Seeing quality, every soul is a distinctive eternal person, and every soul is qualitatively made of, constituted of eternality, bliss, eternal form, whether it's the soul inside an ant, a cow, a dog eater, a Brahmin, a university professor, a white body, a black body, like that. So that's the platform of equality. And without that vision, then we can speak about equality, and we will be fighting with each other over very petty things. Okay, so these are very, whether individually, communally, socially, universally, globally, these are practical philosophical points. And then Prabhupada writes, this requires a great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad Gita and similar literatures heard from a bona fide spiritual master. So, one who is trained to perceive all these things is fortunate. So fortunate, fortune can be seen as like, I'm really lucky to somehow, I can say, because I found Bhagavad Gita and Srila Prabhupada. That might be a bit arrogant, or more than a bit, because like I was so sincere, and not that I'm aware of, so more like Prabhupada and Krishna found me, despite I was trying to run away for another few million lifetimes. So Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jiva, Guru Krishna Prasadipaya Bhakti Lata Beach, the fortunate spirit soul wandering and suffering different happiness and distress in different species, 8,400,000 species, 14 planetary systems. That's just this one universe. And the fortunate spirit soul encounters a pure devotee spiritual master who awakens the seed, the bhakti lata beads, the seed of devotional service. And so at the same time, Prabhupada will quote that man is the architect of his own destiny. I remember a quote from Thomas Jefferson. He said, I believe in luck, and I find that the harder I work, the more I have of it. Okay. So we can be responsible like it's not ultimately about me. As the saying goes, work like everything depends on me, pray like everything depends on Krishna. So we can work to show Prabhupada and Krishna, I'm sincere to attract more fortune into my life. And so we have the opportunity to dedicate our lives to realizing who we are as not the material mask, not the material mask of the ear, the tongue, the nose, and touch. This, of course, yes, that's why I find so much that, like, and when we mention how we're not the body, we're the soul, right? The body changes, but there's some constant identity we experience. So I think oftentimes people automatically go to, I think I used to go there too. Oh, that means the body's not important. Well, we should take care of the body. So I like to preempt that by saying, of course, just like it's important to realize I'm not the car. But when we say I'm not the car, so that means you just let the car get smashed? Of course not. No, we take care of the car. We take care of the car. And we keep it clean and filled with gas. And I think we service it. So, so we can feel fortunate that we have this knowledge. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Bhavanam Janmanam Ante, Ganavanam Prapadite, Vasudev Saramiti, Samahatma Sudurva, that on our own, we can try to figure things out. And if we're sincere, we'll be guided by Super Soul after many lifetimes to come to Bhakti Yoga. Like, hello Malini, Hare Krishna. In Malini's wonderful ecstatic class yesterday, she described like the meditators, and three aspects of the absolute, right? First, the oneness, and there's peace there because we get detached from the frenetic agitation of the material vibrations, the material desires. Ultimately, though, Bhukti Mukti Srikami Sakaliya Shanta Krishna Bhakti Nishkama Ateva Shanta. Ultimately, only the Krishna Bhakta can be peaceful in an enduring way, because we can try to become desireless. The problem there is it's impossible. It's the nature of the soul to desire. So even if we're desiring liberation, if we have the idea is to transform our propensity to desire from matter to devotional service, then that's a very active, dynamic inner peace. It's not like now I can sleep inner peace because I'm not agitated. Sorry to disappoint you, Letty. So
You don't sound sorry.
So yes. So planting, let's say, awakening the Bhakti Lata Bij in our heart, and then we get to give as much energy as we choose to cultivate that seed. We're either going to have a seed of material desire or a seed of spiritual bhakti desire to serve Krishna's pure devotee. And we can describe there's 4 classes of learners. First class hears it, gets it. Second class might hear like first class, okay, here, stealing's not good. Okay, got it, I'm not going to steal. Second class learner, stealing's not good. Oh, I'm not so sure. But then I see, okay, he tried to steal. He's in prison. Got it, not going to steal. Third class learner hears it, doesn't get it. See someone else gets in trouble. So that's just because he's just not as smart as me. I'm going to steal and I'm going to make it work. I'm going to make it work for me in my life. All right, so then I end up in prison and embarrassed in so many ways. And okay, I'm not going to steal anymore. Get it? So then fourth class learner is I hear, I don't get it. I see others get into all sorts of distress. I don't get it. I try it. I don't get it. But then I'm in prison. Fourth class learners. But when I get out of prison or even in prison, I'll be smarter next time. I have a better idea.
I feel some pride to be in the first group.
Okay, you're proud to be there. Yes. So, yeah. So we can hear like, give yourself to self-realization and devotional service. Got it. So, so that's first class learner. Based on results, I am not a first class learner in terms of bhakti yoga, in terms of realizing I'm not the body. And so, because the idea of material desire, dus prana, it burns like fire. And the result, jayatu visham pupsa sangasteshu bhajayate, sangat sanjayate kamat kradu bhajayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops attachment for them. From attachment comes lust, from lust comes anger, and then we're way down the slippery slope. So if we have, if we struggle with anger or different feelings around the constellation of anger, resentment and hostility and bitterness and all of that. So we can go deep into the therapy and all, but basically it means I got some lusty desires that are unfulfilled. I got some lusty desires that are unfulfilled. I'd like a more mystical explanation than that. But that's what it comes down to. And so, so this process of bhakti, which is the Bhagavad Gita, gives many processes. And that's why we're fortunate to have Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, because he gives us, here's the thread that ties it all together, bhakti. Without that, and I actually, in the summer of 1983, while backpacking through Europe, I read another version of Bhagavad Gita. And it really seemed to me like just this hodgepodge of different things. I wasn't moved or impressed. I mean, intellectually a little bit. I didn't even get anything intellectually, just like my sense was the author is using big words and sophisticated language, and his goal is to convince me that he's smart. Okay, all right, great. And then in that same summer, actually I was at summer of 83, I went to a Villa Vrindavan right around this time of year, 1983. It's outside of Florence, Italy. And it's like a Bhakti Yoga ashram. I think this castle or whatever was originally built by Machiavelli. Okay, it's in Italy. And it happened to be Janmashtami. And they had 1,108 preparations. I remember it distinctively. That would, what? Yeah. Most of them were, yeah, I do. I should, exactly. And so that was the turning point for me in my spiritual life. I thought, this is a self-realization conscious process that resonates with me.
My spring didn't have much of that.
It was incomplete. It was incomplete in so many ways. Precisely. So also at it was after I read this other Gita that summer, I read Prabhupada's Gita. I think I read the whole thing. So and I just spent, they didn't trust me to do any service. So probably you should just read. So that was good for me. And then I got very clear knowledge very clear knowledge. Even in that other Gita, I didn't get that I'm not the body. I mean, now I don't realize it, but I do realize it more than I did in 1983. But very clear, I'm not the body, I'm spirit, soul. We're servants of Krishna. So again, in Malini's class, you talk about the meditator and the oneness, and then the oneness, if we're sincere and we're not attached to the ideas of I am the absolute, because Bhakti Yoga Manasi Samyak Pranite Vale Apashyitam Pusham Purnam Mayam Chata Apashray. Vyasadeva has his vision just before he wrote Bhagavatam. We read about it in yesterday's Bhagavatam purport. And he got a vision of the absolute. And his vision of the absolute is that the absolute is not David Wolf. The absolute is not the Jiva soul. No, the absolute is not the indifferentiated oneness. The absolute is Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. And behind him is his energy of Maya. And the living entities are Anarto Pashamam Sakshat, Bhakti Yogamat Hokshaje, Janasya Lokasya Janatara Vidvams, Chakras Satvata Sampita. And then he keeps on, the jivas are suffering because they're thinking that they're the body. And the solution is Bhakti Yoga. And even all the Vedas, they won't get it, they'll get confused. As a result, he wrote the Bhagavatam. So this is the ultimate, this is the most complete, encompassing aspect of the absolute, the personality of Godhead. It encompasses Paramatma in the heart and the oneness. And we are servants. Kamasya Nindriya Pritir Labo Jiveta Yavata. Jivasi Tattva Jigyasa, Nartayaschaya Kar maybe. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should aspire for a healthy life or self-preservation, take care of the car. Because human life is meant for inquiry into the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works. Okay. So to give ourselves, in a sense, we are not the absolute. We're servants. We're servants of Sri Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead. But through verses like this, we get to realize the absolute truth about ourselves. Right? A temporary truth is, I am David Wolf. I'm 60 years old. I got this nose. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I got these ears. That's temporary. Absolute means that which is true in all time and space. So what I just spoke, well, it's some relative truth relative to the virtual reality dream game. But it won't be true 100 years from now. It wasn't true 100 years ago. Eternal truth, I'm not the body, I'm spirit, soul. I'm a servant of the Supreme Personality of God. So today we're reading Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 10. Utkramantam stitam vapi punjanam vagunanvitam vimudhananupashyanti pashanti jnana chakshusha. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. Hare Krishna, thanks for your presence and attention. I welcome if anyone would like to share any comments or realizations or ask any questions. Paramparadas.
I think some ways I can consider like you talked about personal growth, spiritual path, and in some ways, we think of spirituality or genuine religion. It's kind of like the original personal growth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like at one time there was, that was just, that's where, maybe in a general sense, that's where people got character development and morality and
internal character. Yeah, right. Nice.
Like empowerment or whatever it is. That's where people got it, just through that's what was available. And that's what, what worked and everything. And then, and so then it's kind of like the modern, personal growth or self-empowerment. It's kind of like a secular humanist response to, like, they kind of rejected religion or God, really, just rejected God, but then they still want the morality and the character development without God being there.
Yeah. And of course, so much that went on in the name of religion became so external and corrupt. So understandably, many people became dissatisfied and cynical.
So it's like a response to kind of, we want the effect, we want the whatever, the feeling, the empowerment without God, And so that way it's kind of some of that stuff, LifeSpring or personal growth, self-help stuff, it was kind of developed without God.
Yeah.
Kind of detached from God.
Yeah.
True. But there's still value there. And like you said, when you find the completeness, when you can bring it back to put God in the center, then it becomes even more potency and kind of find this completeness. So I just found that interesting that even because people do develop things in the world. It's not, sometimes it's like without God we can't. There can be a sense of like, without God in the picture, then everything's a failure or something. It's like we can't find any happiness or any bliss. It's like some people do find something, whether it's some innovative technique to better themselves or to get some kind of experience in life, or some people are maybe happy naturally, just in material life, not thinking of God,
some sattva or something.
But then so there are things of value, that are modern society without God in the picture. But then if we can take those things and put God into the center and connect it back to God, then it becomes so much more powerful. The completeness, like you're saying.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. Completeness. Putting one in front of the zeros. Although you're saying, because it's not all zeros, but Prabhupada will sometimes say that if our attempts at our own happiness, our attempts at helping others, social service, if the attempts are tamasic or rajasic, then we're probably doing more harm than good. He said if our attempts are, primarily sattvic, then we're probably doing some good. And of course, the real enduring good is that transcendence, And related, I appreciated your, brief historical analysis that the original personal growth was meant like religion. And then so much in the name of religion, whether in India or Europe or America or wherever, became corrupt. And then it even became, to quote the great Janis Joplin, "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? My friends all have Porsches. I must make amends." So great. So and it really relates to the Protestant work ethic. The sociologist Weber analyzed it, like that, because the idea, it's like that, because the idea of the Protestant Reformation was we're saved not by like intrinsically how much money we give to the church or something like that, but it's ultimately faith. But then like, okay, I believe. How do we know if we're saved? So then, this is simplifying, but American capitalism, if you're saved, if you got Mercedes Benz or Porsches, if you're saved, if your capitalism is working well for you. So like capitalism was driven by this, well, then there's grains of truth there, because if someone has any material opulence, physical beauty or education or wealth, it means they did something pious. Hiranyakashipu was materially very successful, and he did austerity. He did austerity. He wasn't a lazy bum. He did something. Yes. So Some of you have heard me share this, and some of you maybe not. But yeah, so the pioneer of the modern day personal growth seminars, his name is Alexander Everett. He was a British fellow. He came to America in the 40s or 50s, and he started the first organization with these human potential seminars in the modern time. And he was called Mind Dynamics. And some of his students were Werner Erhard, who formed EST, which was the most popular human potential training in the 70s, and Lyspring, which was the second most, John Hanley was a student of Werner Erhard. So anyhow, back about 12 years ago, around 2008 or 2009, I was reading an internet article that Alexander Everett had died. He had passed away. And interestingly, what the article said is in the last years of his life, he was traveling around the world giving seminars, and the main process he was teaching in his seminars was chanting Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Shri Ram. So he was like the founder of the secular human potential movement, but somehow in his final years, he connected with, in some solid way, with that one that gives value to the string of zeros, and this chanting the names of Ramachandra. Thanks for your comment. Other questions or comments? Vishnu.
Why is it that personality development, it can only be really powerful when it's connected with God, but then a lot of people that only focus, or externally, it seems they only focus on God, they don't really have much good qualities. Like it's really slow, But then other people that focus on personality development in a secular way, they're more peaceful. It seems like I know there's Harava Bhaktasya, non-devotees have no good qualities.
Yes.
But then externally,
if you just look at your perception and your experience, you go like, it doesn't seem to work that way.
Mm.
Okay, I appreciate your question. I appreciate your question. Yeah. Yes. So, I remember it in the early days, we would conduct workshops or seminars, and practically everyone who came to the seminars identified as a member of devotee community. And we would talk about like Srila Rupa Goswami's statement about exchanges of love between souls interested in self-realization. Two of those items are Guyam Akiti Prichati, to create a sacred space in relationship where it's a safe place to reveal the mind and heart confidentially. So sometimes the devotees in the workshops or seminars, they would hear that and they would go, David, or Dhira Govinda Das, this devotee community is the last place in the world where I would reveal my heart confidentially. So it was funny, but sad, because the idea, like even that basic thing of respecting confidential, like even that wasn't there. So thanks for your question, Vishnu. Yeah, M. Scott Peck, he has a quote I like. He writes, the path to sainthood goes through adulthood. We'll just put that there for now. I'll share a few more things. The path to sainthood goes. So yeah, even in like with Christian monks, we sometimes hear them say, we spent the last 25 years trying to become saints. We're going to spend the next 25 years trying to become human beings. Okay. So it's the past decade or few, it's become a fairly common term, spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass, meaning, yes, I chant these rounds, I do these meditations, I get up at 5 a.m. That means I'm spiritual. Mam Chiro Vabhicharya Bhakti Yogana Sevate Sagunan Samatitya Ten Brahma Bhuyaya Kapate. And one who's a devotee is automatically transcendental to the material modes of nature. So who are those devotees? It must be me. It must be me, because like I'm studying Bhagavad Gita, that means I'm transcendental to the modes of nature. And that means if it looks to you that like over like a really slight thing, I get angry and defensive, and it's like, yo, what'd you say that for? If to you, it looks like I'm impatient and intolerant, but you don't understand. It's my transcendental mercy. Of course, I'm too humble to say that, but you just don't understand. Okay, so, right, or yes, okay, so that's why sattva gun quality, peace, tolerance, cleanliness, sense control, yes, truthfulness. Sattva gun quality is not the goal. The goal is transcendence, is pure devotional service to Krishna. Okay, and so that's a true part of the philosophy, but it's misused in a spiritual bypass way. So that's why Prabhupada so much emphasizes, no, it's part of our bhakti yoga to cultivate sattva, to cultivate sattvic qualities, to see, no, I'm intolerant, I'm impatient, I got this thick ego, my tendency is towards overeating and oversleeping, and my tendency is to try to glorify myself and hide any weaknesses, even if just like, no, look at my weaknesses. Aren't I the most humble? Or, you know, I mean, we can be a little clever. And to my tendency is to devalue others because I'm envious, but I'll make it seem like I'm just instructing them in spiritual life. Yes. Okay. So now I've got all these rajasic, tamasic tendencies. Let me, as part of my bhakti yoga process, cultivate the sattvic qualities. And if we neglect that, then we're susceptible to the spiritual bypass. Oh, I'm doing these transcendental things. Transcendental means chanting or serving the deities or discussing Bhagavad. All these activities are transcendental. That doesn't mean my consciousness is transcendental in doing those activities. That's why in the third canto of Bhagavatam, Lord Kapila Dev, discussing with his mother, he says there's devotional service in ignorance. If I'm doing some service and I'm like, oh, it wasn't my turn to do this, Arti, it was her. No fair. Or if I'm doing some devotional service and I'm learning a shloka, I'm like, I learn a shloka, then everyone will look at me and they'll say, wow, he's really smart. And then they'll clap and they'll admire me. Yeah, let me learn this shloka. So is that devotional service? According to Kapila Dev, it is devotional service in the mode of rajas. And devotional service in the mode of sattva, that's truly for purification and out of compassion. And transcendental devotional service is truly one who's in love with Krishna and simply wants to serve Krishna out of love. So cultivating sattva is important for just the reason that your question indicates. Consciously cultivating sattva and not making it the ultimate goal. Maybe you've heard the analogy of like the airport. So if I want to fly to New York City, then we can say the best platform to get to New York City is the Jacksonville, Florida airport. Right? So I go to the Jacksonville, Florida airport. It's important to go there if I want to achieve the goal. But let's say if I get so comfortable in the Jacksonville, Florida airport, and they're playing nice music, and there are shops, and I can buy a little fruit salad. Whoa! And there's a book stand. I get so comfortable there that they start calling, okay, David Wolf, the flight is leaving, and I don't get on the flight. Then, so it's important to get to the Jacksonville airport to achieve the transcendental goal of New York City. At the same time, the airport itself isn't the goal. So we do want to cultivate sattvic qualities. I know you've heard a bit about our Sattva seminars from Ramachandra's videos or from Lakshmi Priya or whoever. So the name of our institute, Sattva, and then Tov. Tov means the same as Sattva in the biblical Hebrew. Sattva means goodness or enlightenment. Tov, Mazel Tov means goodness in the biblical Hebrew. So we're encouraging the cultivation of sattvic qualities consciously. And I'll close with, okay, the analogy from Rupa Goswami, watering the garden. And so it's important, if we want flowers, to water the garden. But if we water, even if there's sunlight and nutrients, it's also important to pull the weeds. A lot of what we do in our Sattva programs is technologies, methodologies for powerfully pulling the weeds. I remember this was, this was like 4 years, the 2017 advanced course. It was Lakshmi Priya's first advanced course with Kalyapani. And afterwards, there was the Roots program. There was the Roots program. It was like a Bhakti Yoga program after an intensive 7-day Sattva seminar. Kalyapani, he passed away about a little over 2 years ago. But he, since the early 70s, he's a great inspired kirtan leader. And at that Roots program, we had like everyone from the course was there, like everyone from the course. And we had like another 15 advanced course graduates come. There's like 35 people here. And Kalyapani's been in thousands or tens of thousands of kirtans. But he told me after that program, because it was such, he told me that he'd never experienced anything like it. He told me he was palpably seeing the bhakti lata bejas, the seed, the flowers of devotional service grow, because everyone, and for many, this was their first kirtan. For many, this was their first Bhagavad Gita discussion. This was their first time chanting japa. And he said he'd never seen anything like it. And again, he'd seen thousands and thousands of kirtan all around the world with thousands of people. Thousands of people at one time, millions of people altogether. But he was saying, like, he was just seeing like the fields were clear. And so the flowers of devotional service, he was just like seeing them sprouting like he'd never seen before. And he was moved because he could see everyone did the anarta nivriti, the pulling the weeds work. And so what often happens, because this chanting Hare Krishna, it's the most powerful process in the cosmos. Chant Hare Krishna, part of the power is we become awakened to the bliss of the soul. The love of Krishna begins to awaken. And part of the power is the weeds come up. The weeds come up. That's part of the power. And then our opportunity and responsibility is to pull the weeds. What sometimes happens is through chanting is powerful, weeds come up. Oh, my greed, my deception, my lust, my envy, et cetera, my anger, all of that. The weeds come up, but instead of celebrating, wow, a great chance to get rid of these weeds, I might go, oh, lust, envy, bitterness, complacency. No, I'm a spiritual devotee. Those can't be there, so then I'll push them back down. So that's not a fault of the Bhakti Yoga process. It means I didn't do my pulling the weeds work. And then, as Rupa Goswami describes, the watering, if we don't pull the weeds, the watering waters the weeds. And then each mantra I chant, again, the chanting is pure and transcendental. Because of my each mantra I chant waters the weeds of I'm superior because I got up earlier than you this morning. Of course, I don't say that, but yeah, it waters the weeds of my arrogance and my superiority and my self-deception. So it's important to pull the weeds, otherwise the weeds strangle the Bhakti Lata creeper. And what you share in your question, Vishnu, I believe, like maybe what you perceived is maybe you've got some people who are genuine and sincere and sattvic. Maybe they haven't, discovered Bhakti Yoga. And so they have really fine qualities. And maybe some devotees who've found or stumbled upon the transcendental process. I don't want to just say they, because I'm guilty of all of this, but just to speak philosophically, but maybe they're neglecting the pulling the weeds. Maybe they're neglecting. Let's go to the Jacksonville airport. Let's cultivate sattva. Prabhupada emphasizes it so much. How's that sound?
But how do you know if you're pulling the weeds or you're just pushing them down? Because either way you can't see them. So how can you tell?
How do we know if we're pulling the weeds or just pushing them down? I appreciate your question because it's like a subtle thing. Just like I know if I've chanted 16 rounds, I have a bead counter. It's like very palpable. So that's a subtle question, and it's a subtle discussion. It requires honesty. Like most of the time, if I'm really honest with myself, I know whether it's a flower or a weed. And I know that I like to pretend my weeds are pretty flowers. And that also, your question points to the principle of Sangha. Surrounding ourselves with people who are perceptive and who care enough about us, who in a loving way, to share honest feedback. Like, Dhira Govinda Das, I know you think that's a pretty flower, but there's 5 or 10 of us here who kind of experience it as a weed for your consideration. That's one of the main purposes of Sangha, to create safe and sacred spaces amongst ourselves, to share the heart confidentially. Here's what I'm struggling with. To ask confidential, like I'm sensing you've got some toxic habits that are really causing a lot of shame. Would you like to talk about it? So that's where Sangha, to help us see our blind spots, because false ego means I want to see myself as a lot better, more sattvic, more transcendental than I am. So that's where honest feedback amongst people similarly sincere on the path of self-realization is really important. Thanks for your questions. Hare Krishna.
May I also ask something?
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so you spoke about when we chant or engage ourselves in the bhakti yoga process, we also water the weeds and
Yeah.
the weeds grow.
Yeah.
And then we have the opportunity to pull them. But also in my experience and experience of people who come to me for guidance,
Yeah.
sometimes it's really overwhelming. And so the question that often comes,
Yeah.
not from me only, but also from these people, is what if the weeds that are growing and it's so overwhelming and it becomes a little unbearable? Is it better to slow down with the practice? That's the question that comes. Can there be a situation that is healthier to okay, I will not chant 16 rounds, I will chant 8 rounds because it brings so much weeds up and I don't know how to deal with them. Like that.
Okay. All right. All right. Okay, this practice is overwhelming me with its power and the weeds coming up.
Mm-hmm. I went to a healer.
Yeah.
And she told me I need to stop. I didn't listen,
Yeah.
but she told me I need to stop the practice of chanting because it's too powerful. Yeah. And I'm not ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it resonated with me somewhat what she said at that time. I didn't listen to her,
yes.
But still this topic comes up in my life quite a bit. Not personally right now, but from others.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, so it's important that we're receiving ourselves and others where they're at. like that in the context of the totality of the philosophy. So, I'm not going to say like, no, it's never good to do that. At the same time, we want to be extremely cautious about recommending decreasing chanting, considering Kali, Claire, Dharma, Krishna, Nam, Sankirtan, that, this chanting Hare Krishna, it's the most effective way to liberate us from material miseries once and for all, forever. So, so I'm not going to say, no, never, that's real, because I've coached and facilitated people in such a situation. So, but let's consider like, okay, what might be this and that? What might be this and that? Like, okay, let's continue, fulfill my commitment to myself and Srila Prabhupada to chant at least 16 rounds per day. And how can I be more effective in being courageous to notice the weeds and pulling them and clearing my heart? How can I be more effective? Maybe elicit more support. Maybe just reduce my false ego. Maybe will be willing to tolerate more pain as the beach ball comes up. So I'm not saying no, it's never good. At the same time, let's explore a win-win, this and that here. Let's be open to that. Because otherwise, in the name of, it's too powerful and the weeds that are coming up, it can become a new agey rationalization. So let's be attuned to that. Yeah.
I'm just like, when I consider that, I try to think a little bit of what I understood from Prabhupada and like what he might respond to a devotee or something like that. I can imagine that it's like, okay, so the process is like overwhelming, powerful, and it's just like the reins, pulling back the reins,
Yeah.
That whole thing. So it's like, okay, but then like so it's like, okay, my life isn't working like this. I need to do some rearranging.
Yeah.
And I could imagine there could be some other rearranging that could be done.
Yeah.
Like the chanting vows, that's where I would go first, is like, maybe, what other things could be rearranged before going to like the chanting vows core,
That's great.
vows.
Yeah, maybe keep the chanting and maybe have a few extra sweet balls or gulab jamans. No, really. And then then it's not as intense. Oh, it's sweet. Or like that.
Or less intense in chanting. That's
Or keep chanting your 16 rounds and go to swim with dolphins.
Yes, yeah. Have more recreation. Maybe more balance and more recreation. It's affirmed by Krishna. Yukta hara viharasya, yukta chestasya kamasya, yukta sapna babodasya, yoga bhavati dukkha. Krishna says, are we balanced in recreation? Are we balanced in eating and sleeping and work? Yeah, so that's an excellent response. Thanks for that, Prampa. Because let's not go, I should chant less. Yeah, so maybe
probably another thing,
Yeah.
I'm honest,
Yeah.
Things I could do that are also overwhelming. It's like I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's probably not just the chanting. It's probably my life is set up in a way that I'm, where I can be less overwhelmed
Yeah,
by rearranging it slowly.
thanks for that. Excellent point, in my opinion.
Hare Krishna.
Malini?
Yeah, I like this point from Pampa, because that's what I've seen also. I had that coming and coaching a lot, and usually there is something behind it. And there is expectation often, like expectation that I should be a pure devotee tomorrow, or expectation that, a lot of expectation about what my spiritual life should look like and all that. And then I chant, and then I see all those weeds, And the weeds are not overwhelming, really. What's overwhelming is what I make them mean. What's overwhelming is how I process them, as in a dual perspective, like, oh, I shouldn't be envious, or I shouldn't be
Yes.
angry, or I shouldn't be. And then that's where the overwhelming and pain come. And then, yes, so all it's based on like tightening the rein too tight in a way that, emotional attachment to expectation, because I want the horse to be perfectly looking.
Thanks for that distinction. Thanks for that vital distinction, Malini. Yeah, it's not the weeds, it's not the chanting, but my expectations of how pure and great, and then it just conflicts with my expectations. So it's like it's really a practice of maybe instead of giving up chanting, maybe cultivate some humility. No, okay. Thanks for that. That's a vital distinction, Molly. Yeah, when I first moved into the ashram in Renana, Israel, outside of Tel Aviv, it was early in '84. For the first 2 weeks, I was a pure devotee. No, I was blissful, just enthusiastic, and then the next 5 years were terrible. But those first 2 weeks, it was just, I was just shining, but this was my problem. But then like doubts, and then doubts came, and then resistance, and then like I wanted everything except surrender, not surrender, and then everything became a struggle, and it was tormenting for years. So and it was because my expectation of where I should be. So that's a very vital point, Molly. Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hare Krishna.